Good afternoon, everyone. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. As Dr. Issa said, I work for Ericsson, and this is a company which is kind of everywhere, but you don't really see it. We're the half of Sony Ericsson and many of your mobile phones, but the Ericsson itself has been around for about 130 years, and we provide the equipment that all of our telephone calls and internet access and so on goes through. About 40% of all the telephone calls that all of us make ever go through Ericsson kit. Now, the interesting thing about that is that being around for so long, we have to plan for the longer term. We have to think about how trends are really going to evolve over a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. And when I started talking to Tama of BOLDtalks about what we might present, we'd been doing some studies over the last few years, and Ericsson has a company called Consumer Lab, which interviews around 50,000 people every year. And in a recent study, we found that there was a real difference between those of us who were born before and after 1980. 1980 seemed to be the magic time, and I thought it would be useful for us to come and share some of these findings with you, and that's really the topic of my material today. I thought I'd start off with something that maybe would be a little bit familiar to you, and these are news headlines. Headlines that you might have read in the paper, or you might have picked up from the internet. Perhaps you might have seen them on television. But in fact, these particular headlines were very prevalent in 1839 when the railroads were rolled across the states, and it seems like the US has become a common theme in this, and I promise you it wasn't organised that way. But the interesting thing was that one industry that was immediately disrupted was, of course, messaging of the day. And in those days you had to shift mail using what they call the Pony Express. And in 3 years' time, that whole industry was completely destroyed. And what this is evidence of, if you like, as you start to think about these headlines that we might see, it's just evidence of disruption. And of course, we're in another disruptive time now, and it's all based around technology changes, changing the way we do things and how we approach challenges. And we know that there's been a lot of technology revolutions over the years, and of course this particular one is the IT and telecommunications revolution. There was a study which had been undertaken in the Cambridge University with a professor called Carlota Perez, and what she found is that with every technology shift, there's a period of what they call installation and then a period of deployment. And what we mean by that is that this technology really takes on for one particular application, and then it just goes crazy thereafter. And if I just use electricity as an example, the core reason for electricity being successful to begin with was simply to bring a light bulb into our house. And the idea of exchanging these lamps and all of the difficulty of getting light, otherwise everyone really bought that whole idea. And after a few decades, people are thinking, actually what else can I do with this electricity? And then starts to come things like cooking and microwaves and all the other electrical things that we all take for granted today. Now, the interesting thing about deployment, if we now start to look at where we're at with the telecommunications industry, is we've had roughly 30 years of delivering connectivity to all of us. And now we start to have generations which now have taken, for example, voice and data, which we can deliver now pretty much anywhere you go. And now they're starting to think of new ways to use this, and that's what's creating this big disruption. Most of us are used to the idea of having a mobile phone. There are around 6 billion people on the planet, and we're soon to connect 5 out of every 6, so 5 billion mobile phones. It's the fastest growing technology really ever in the world. And we used to think that delivering communications was to a place like a house, and then people. But now the sometimes called the Internet of Things will come. We forecast that by 2020 there will be 50 billion connected devices, basically 10 devices for each and every one of us worldwide. And that's physically what's going to happen. But how does our attitudes start to change about what we're going to use those for? And let's have a talk about that. So if you're born after 1980, is there anyone in the room lucky enough to be born after 1980? Born after 1980? Me, Penny, yeah. So if you're born after 1980, then things like mobile phones and text messaging and Twitter and Google and Wikipedia Facebook, MySpace, Hulu, all of these things are very natural. And the way you think about these, in fact, it's always been half of your adult life. If you're born in 1980, you're turning 30 last year. So for the last 15 years, it becomes all these things, they've just always been like that. I was looking at a typewriter the other day, and my daughter said, "That's the most stupid stupid computer I've ever seen. You can't even see, what the stuff is you're typing, and there's nowhere to do the delete." And I just gave up trying to, explain to her what this term carbon copy meant, about putting the bit of carbon. So there's those of us oldies who kind of know what I'm talking about, and the rest of you are just going, yeah, whatever. So the oldies, if you're born before 1980, then we called ourselves digital immigrants. We kind of immigrated to this world. In fact, this world came to us. And we have a couple of us here from our industry, and often I'm giving this talk to telecommunications industries, and I'd say, actually it was our fault, us engineers, we built this, and then those damn people, they went and did something else with it that we hadn't even thought of. And it's interesting, the quote that came up this morning about if these guys had known that we'd all be, messaging each other in a coffee shop, they might not have continued with their development. But nevertheless, it makes some fundamental changes. And one of the things I'd like to talk about is a values shift which I see around the concept of privacy. Concept of privacy. And I'd like to talk to you about that by using an application which I have a lot of faith in, which will change the world, which many of you might have already heard of. And it's called augmented reality. Now the photo hasn't come out very well, but I'd just like to explain to you what augmented reality is. It's a simple idea that if I hold up my phone and I'm looking at an image through the phone, actually extra information gets put onto that image based on whatever's around me. So you can see this guy's holding up his phone. There's a few extra icons in the background, and as he moves his phone around, they'll move as well, because we know who you are and we know what you're looking at. Another example of augmented reality. It looks like this guy's actually holding a phone, but if you look closely, he's not holding a phone, he's holding a piece of cardboard. And on the cardboard is a special little design where the camera that's looking at that design has been told, if you see this design, pop up a phone. If you look closely, you can see he's actually holding on to it, so the phone there isn't really there. This real picture has been augmented, and as he moves the card around, then that phone is going to move around as well. And I was just thinking before, as I was coming past these nice BMW cars that are parked outside, if you imagine if you're holding up your phone and you start looking at this car, information can pop up about it. Now, if you're a 25 to 35-year-old guy, you're going to be thinking, I'd like to get, what's the acceleration, how much horsepower, what's the top speed. If you're a 35 to 45, maybe you're thinking, how can I enhance the sound system, what extra accessories can I get? If you're a woman who's 35 to 45, maybe you're thinking, how safe is this? What's the fuel economy? So we can start to get personalised information about whatever we like. Now, just by holding our phone up and looking at it. Now, who here in this room reckons, that sounds pretty cool? Hold my phone up, look at stuff, get information. A few brave souls, sounds pretty good. Who here is really offended? Have I offended anyone? Anyone upset? Anyone really annoyed? We have one person over there annoyed. Great. Anyone confused? What is this about being annoyed? A few more people. In order for us to be able to deliver you information which is personalised, we've got to know, are you a guy or a girl? How old are you? What are the last things that you're looking at? Because maybe that woman who's 35 to 45, maybe she loves the acceleration. She doesn't want to go out safety stuff. She wants to get, the performance. How fast is it going to go? I've got to know where you are. I've got to know what you're looking at. I've got to know a lot of stuff about you before I can then filter and deliver what is relevant to what you want. Now, if you're a digital native, you're saying, yeah, well, I'll for the convenience of getting what I want, I'm happy to give up a bit of privacy. I'll tell you a bit about myself. Just give me what I want. Digital immigrants, we're like, hey, no way, I'm not telling you about me. You're going to take advantage. I'm going to keep that information to myself. I'm going to keep that very private. And you know what? When you're advertising and you get it wrong, I'm going to let you guess what I want, and then I'm going to complain when you don't get it right. Now, you can see how our attitudes start to change when it comes to privacy and about giving a little in order to get a little. And I think that this is one of the interesting disruptive changes between our perspective as a digital immigrant versus a digital native. I was looking around for some quotes. As you get older, I shave off my head so you can't see how grey I am. But, you start saying things like the youth of today, and they're so emotional, and, they don't have any respect for their elders. There's all sorts of these quotes. I searched through the internet, and I found the oldest one, excuse me, from Aristotle. And the question really was, are the youth, are we any different today than we were at any time? Because we've always been making these quotes about the youth jumping into this or jumping into that. And my honest belief is that actually they are different. And Don Tapscott is a guy who works for a Canadian firm called Ingenera, and he's a chief insight officer. And Ericsson did an interview with him a little while ago, and I read it with interest, and he made some comments which really kind of sat with me about the difference between, children today compared to yesterday. And when I think about when I was a kid, it was actually impossible for me to know more than my parents until I was maybe 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. By that stage, I'm starting to go to school, I'm starting to study something which is a little bit more diverse than what my parents might have known about. But then I'm starting to become a young adult, and I'm having the maturity of knowing, of learning things and knowing things. Whereas now, with the ability to click on Wikipedia, Google, go and surf out anywhere we like, we now start to see a time when children can know more than their parents about whatever they're interested in at a very young age. And so, as he talks about being interested in train sets, we now have our children are able to deal with very complex commerce issues today. And what he talks about in this particular study is that we now see this big power shift between parents and their children. And the only other time this the closest thing we have to this happening any other time in history is when, if you think of a family moving to a country where no one speaks the language, the first thing that happens is the youngest one picks it up in a heartbeat, and then the parents have to negotiate and translate through the child in order to get stuff done. And there's a slight imbalance of power. Now imagine if all of commerce, the way we see value, advertising, all of those things have changed fundamentally. Then not only is the language different, but our whole concepts of trade and value all become very different as well. And as he says, this will never happen before. And I think this also creates a really interesting challenge between how we relate to each other, because our parents are still trying to parent their children to do the right things. I thought I'd grab a couple of us versus them, and I'm sure there's no surprises. The two I wanted to highlight probably was around this communication. And Penny mentioned this idea before about, face-to-face is so important. And I think that, to us, digital immigrants, it is really important. But is it really that important to the youth of today? And interestingly, we read roughly 3 times faster than we speak. If I started reading this thing out, you guys would get really upset really quickly, because you could read faster, you'd be finished before I could finish it, right? And now our kids are typing so fast that they can type faster than they can speak. So are they not actually increasing their ability to communicate? And when we think about, expression, our ability to express ourselves is unprecedented. There are no limits. And I was having a chat just in the hallway with a gentleman who was asking about, is this all really a good idea? Now, people can be someone that they're not really on the internet. Well, if that's what it takes in order to get this amazing idea out, maybe that's not such a bad thing. If they were too shy in the real world to get some idea out, which the rest of us could take advantage of, maybe that's a useful thing for all of us. But certainly the orders of magnitude around how many friends we talk about. People talk about, if you're an oldie like me, I count my friends on one hand. If you're a young person, you say, I count my friends in the hundreds. All of my friends on Facebook. So I'm sure most of you know what Wiki stands for. Who'd like to volunteer? Wiki? Wiki, W-I-K-I, Wiki. Wiki, what I know is. What I know is Wikipedia, WikiLeaks. You know, the interesting thing is that this term know, this is one of the challenges or worries that I have for the youth of today, because you're feeling pretty powerful now, all you young people. I can go and find out whatever I want on the internet. I'm empowered. I can tweet. I can go to social networks. I can Google things. But what's really true? What's real? And I'm sure Dr. Zimbardo will tell you that in order to get his material published, it needed to be corroborated by many experts in journals that were well respected and had a good reputation, and they had to have lots of references in order before that would become published for people to read. We don't have to worry about that now. We can jump onto a blogging site. People take it very seriously. I know many companies in the fast-moving consumer goods are building blogging departments in order to engage with bloggers, so that when they have some report of bad customer experience, they can manage that. So the need for us to sanitize the truth or otherwise of information, there is none. It doesn't exist. It is just amazing ability to socialize lots of ideas. And, there's a couple of interesting quotes here. 34,000 searches every second on Google. Isn't it astounding? 34,000 searches. How powerful is Google based on being able to connect to people 34,000 times a second, every second of every day? Are they really choosing the best things for us? And, I don't have any, I don't want to cast any aspersions onto this, other than I think that our youth of today may feel very powerful because they can go and find out whatever they like, but therein lies their vulnerability, because they're so keen to jump on the back of some kind of idea. It must be true. I found it on the internet. I Googled it. I corroborated it by some other website. So I'd just be very careful about what you believe. So I'd just like to wrap up my 20 minutes with a little bit of advice, if you like, because I think the key really issue is here that if you're a digital native, you have the burden of figuring all this stuff out, because by the time you have kids, they'll already be digital natives. The idea that your children might know more than you about something, that'll be perfectly natural. That there are social networks and the information is all out there, that will be all natural too. So the first thing I'd have is be patient with each other. And it's not about who's right or wrong, but in 40 years' time, if you're born in 1980, you'll be turning 70. And the rest of us oldies will be much older, and there won't be so many of us. So whatever values that you think are important, those will be the ones that pervade, and we also will be relegated to history, just like the oil. I think from a digital immigrant's point of view, we need to be careful that we don't hold on to a bunch of old ideas that we thought were fantastic, but actually aren't so relevant anymore. Some of those things are really good, some of those aren't so good, and you have to make a personal choice as to which ones you think are relevant for you. I think the more time we spend together, we can start to tease out what are those things we can keep from the good old days, and what are those things we should embrace with the way things are evolving around these social networks, internet, technology, the way youth uses them, and so on. Be open to change. Things will change, and I can't even imagine what will happen in the next 5 years. Imagine that only 5 or 6 years ago, Facebook was only like an idea in a guy's head, and now there are 500 million active users. 50% of Facebook users access it every other day, every second day. If you look at the stats on Facebook, I had a little bit of a snoop through, 90% of Facebook users access it every single week. Every week. It's not going to go away. And again, another message to digital immigrants, get into social networks. It might not be something you like. It might not be something that feels natural. You might not understand why people spend so much time tweeting, or why they go into Facebook, why they would rush home and update their latest thought on MySpace or whatever. But as you start to get involved, it'll help you relate to how the future of mankind is evolving. Because this shift will only happen one time in the history of mankind. We will go from being non-digital to digital in our attitudes. And soon enough, this experience of going through this turbulence will be far behind us. And to you kids, I know you must hate being called kids by now, but never mind. Feel happy that you're young. Be careful what you believe. We've already heard about people with agendas out there in the world. And I don't have any good advice on how to sanitize what's true otherwise, but just be careful. And maybe don't be so quick to dispel your parents when they're trying to protect you from pain that's out there. There's plenty of pain. And I was trying to think of a good metaphor for finishing off this presentation around the ride. And, it feels a little bit stormy this time that we're in. And 2 years ago, Ericsson was competing in the Volvo Ocean Race. This race has actually come into the UAE. Ericsson won it last time, and so they decided they'll go and do something else. They're not in it next time. But the thing I like about this movie, I'm just going to play, is if you just... it's a lot about teamwork. It's pretty scary. You look how fast these guys are sailing.
Put it out of control last night.
They do this. They did this for 24 hours. In fact, they do it for 9 months at a time.
So far, we haven't written anything on the job list after.
And these guys are doing this at night time as well.
That's good. We're happy
when
about that.
It's pitch black.
And
at the end of this particular period,
not banging around.
They managed to achieve the longest monohull distance in 24 hours under sail, which I think is pretty impressive. So my story really to wrap up is, if we stick together, we can weather the storm, and it's a pretty exciting ride in the meantime. And that's probably a good time to wrap up in the interest of time. Thank you very much.